Okay, welcome back. I think the first thing we should talk about is palm muting. Um, Anytime you see that PM in music or PM with a bunch of dots versus let ring, that means palm muting. And you can palm mute on acoustic guitar, electric guitar. It can be a clean tone or a dirty tone. What usually happens on an acoustic guitar and a really clean guitar sound is if you over mute, you're going to get a real clicky sound. With more distortion, it gives more of a beefy kind of sound. So I have a little bit of distortion on this guitar amp, not a lot. And the point isn't the distortion. The point is to learn this technique. And a lot of people struggle with it because they don't know what part of their hand to use. They start doing funny things with their hand to try to get it to work out. So I tend to explain it like this. If you just take your hands off the guitar and then you were just to kind of drop them on there, like if you just take your right hand, right, and just kind of let it fall on the guitar, that's a pretty good place to be for palm muting. So when I palm mute, depending on the style of music and how much you want to mute, you're applying pressure and relieving pressure with this part of your hand, the palm. So if I just put my palm on there and I really push down hard and mute, it's real clicky. Now listen what happens when I back off the pressure. It kind of opens up, right? So my hand isn't really pushing into the strings terribly hard, but it's just kind of resting on there and staying on there. You see that? So this part of my hand is just resting on the guitar strings. So we'll do some exercises, and the important thing is to play around with this muting on your own guitar and as you play. And it's not uncommon that people don't get it right away, because your hands are doing two different things, and this one over here is trying to figure out how much pressure to apply, when to really lock it down, when to back it off, because it does affect your tone. And it's kind of a stylistic thing too. So for right now, just think about putting your hand on the guitar and then using that part of your palm. So there's an E power chord. I'm just hitting two strings, and this part of my palm is in contact with those two strings. It's actually touching all the strings, but we're not playing those strings, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so that's the palm muting, and we'll get into that. I'm going to show you that's going to be part of our practice routine with these couple exercises we'll do. So that's the palm muting part of it. The other thing is explaining and understanding basic rhythm and subdividing and counting. And that's important because if you can't count and hear a pulse and start to learn to integrate a pulse internally, you're going to be speeding up, slowing down. It's going to be very difficult to play with people or play with recordings. So we all need to internalize our own sense of time and rhythm, and it's best to do that with a metronome, so you're not just guessing and making up your own thing. So on the counting and palm muting sheet, if you look at that first line, you'll see that note that's not colored in. It's in 4/4. It says G5. And 4/4 means we're going to count, and there will be 4 beats per measure, and the quarter note gets the count. Okay? So if I'm tapping my foot, every time my foot is down, that's a downbeat. That's a count. So a whole note gets 4 of those, and then you get a bar line, 4 more, and then it goes to F for 4, F for 4, G5 for 4, G5 for 4. So what this would look like is G5, 2, 3, 4, G5, 2, 3, 4, F5, 3, 4, F5, back to G5, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now if I were to play that, it would look and sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. G5, 2, 3, 4. G5, 2, 3. Repeat. G, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. F, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's the first line using the whole notes, and I wasn't palm muting or anything. I was just letting the chord ring through. If you look at the next line, again, we're in 4/4, and now we'll take that 4 count and cut it in half. So half of 4 is 2. So a half note is an unfilled note with a stick on it, and each one gets 2 beats. So line number 2, I'm not going to mute it, would be like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, G, G, 2, G, 4. F, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Back to G. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that line you could repeat. So the idea is just going back and forth and counting. It's really important that you count. If you have to, count out loud, play to a metronome, but we want to start internalizing that pulse, and we want to start to be able to work with it when we see it in music or tablature, just that basic subdivision that is a half note. Okay, now let's look at the next one, quarter notes. So we've taken 4, cut it in half down to 2. Now we'll take the 2 and cut that down in half to 1. And we wind up with 4 quarter notes in a measure. So now I'll play really the third line on that counting and palm muting sheet, and it will look and sound like this. We'll start with the G5, 2, 3, 4. G, 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 F. G. 1, 2, 3, 4. Repeat. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. F. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. G. Okay, now you also may or may not have noticed one thing I did at the beginning is I didn't lift my fingers. I just kind of kept almost the same amount of pressure, and I just slid down. You'll get some string noise, but it's also a really common thing to do is to slide in and out of power chords. So work on doing it both ways. I'll tell you this, if you're keeping the pressure and you just push through the fret and you slide and you keep doing that, you're keeping constant pressure on your fingers and your hands, and it can cause some fatigue after a little bit. It's not a big deal. You'll build up endurance and strength in your hands, but sometimes that squeaking sound drives people crazy, especially on an acoustic guitar. So what you could also practice, and this is what I'm doing towards the end of that exercise, is when it came time to move, 1, 2, 3, 4, I relieved the pressure of my left hand a little bit, but I stayed in contact with the strings. I didn't lift them far off. I relieved the pressure, and then I moved, and I applied the pressure back. But notice I'm not doing a bunch of crazy things with my thumb. I'm not taking my hand out of position. That will cost you time, and you'll be more likely to make a mistake. So practice this both ways. Practice pushing through the fret. Just know where you're going with that first finger and just get there. Keep the pressure applied, and then move again. And just force your fingers to just slide through the frets, just push through and get there. And then also practice. Relieve the pressure. You hear the difference, and you can see it too. I'm relieving it just enough, but I'm staying in contact with the strings. Okay, now, eighth notes. If you look at page 2 of the counting and palm muting pages, anytime you see a bar connecting together those notes, that signifies an eighth note. So notice we have 8 eighth notes in this measure of 4/4. A measure of 4/4 gets 4 beats. You can play it with whole notes. That fulfills the 4 beats. You can play it with 2 half notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are your 4 beats. You can play it with quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. The way you subdivide eighth notes, you still have your primary beat, 2, 3, 4. And if you're tapping your foot, that's the number, 2, 3, 4. When your foot is in the air, that's the and of the beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Okay, so if I were to play this, not palm muting, so I'll do the first exercise. I'm just going to hit the same power chord the same way and count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2. Okay, that time I just slid. Now in the next exercise, that little PM written above, that means palm mute. So I'm just going to sit, I'm going to park on this G5 for a second, and I'll do it with power chords. Here's the mute. See how you can still hear the pitches? What happens is people tend to overmute, and it just gets clicky. If you're getting that, just back off with the right hand. So my palm is just kind of barely on the strings, and you get more of the pitch. Hear the difference? Here's no palm mute. Here's a palm mute. So it can really tighten up a sound, and especially in like harder rock and stuff, you'll hear that a lot. So being able to palm mute is a really common and effective technique. Now I'll play a little bit of that last exercise with the palm mutes just so you can hear that. And again, I'm just playing eighth notes. So that's the extent in this entire course of what we'll do is whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes. So this is what that last exercise on the sheet looks like, the last 2 lines. So 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and pressure, less string noise. But I could do this if I want. 2, 3, 4. And just drag through. It's not a big deal. You'll get better at both, and there's a time and a place for both. And eventually you'll start muting with one hand and a different mute on the left hand. But this is the foundation of muting and getting the left hands to be a little more independent. So that explains the counting and the palm muting. You'll want to refer back to this as we go through the course, because I'm going to play these exercises and give these lessons utilizing different rhythms, some palm muting, some not, and then just moving this power chord up and down the neck. So in the next video, I'll give you an exercise on the 5th string, and in the course there will be a whole bunch of more exercises on the 6th string. But I'm going to give you one on the 6th string and then one on the 5th string, so we can just get you started on those 2 strings. All right, I'll see you in a minute.